So welcome again to the May IFBF meeting. Hopefully with the restrictions now lifting and stuff sort of beginning to thaw and change, maybe next month we'll be back at the Mercure. I hope so anyway. It'd be great to get back out and be allowed to move around and stuff. Today's agenda is pretty packed. We've got some industry update info coming from Zarco. We've got a few of our sponsors who are going to give us a little bit of a rundown on what's going on out there. And then I've arranged for David Bassanese from Betashares. He's the chief economist of Betashares. You guys might remember him from a previous meeting where we had him present. He's going to give us a little update on what's going on. And then I'm really excited about having Sarah Barnett, who's going to talk about Instagram, which is one of those online platforms that frankly my kids use and I don't use it at all, but apparently there's a few brokers out there kicking some massive goals, generating business off of Instagram. So very excited to hear about that. First thing I thought I would just quickly cover this morning, if I can get this open, where did it go? Here we go. Is a few of you responded to our question about what's frustrating you. So while I'm just recapping a couple of things, please do have a little think about the frustrations that you got at the moment, and then we'll just have a little opportunity to share from folks in the meeting. Oop, let me admit a couple more people. Sorry guys, I'm trying to do admin and do it all. Yasmin's coming in, admit. Okay, there we go. So hopefully we got everybody now. Anyway, I don't know about you guys, but I have found dealing with lenders to be exceptionally painful at the moment. And that seems to be the majority of the commentary that I've seen from people that did respond, was that there's a lot of frustration with wait times with some lenders. And I think credit policies at the moment seem to be changing almost weekly as the lenders, I think, vacillate between sheer panic and terror and now probably thawing out some of their policies and things like that. But aside from, maybe the issues with dealing with banks, are there any other frustrations that that you guys have? And if you just want to raise your hand, I'll try to get a full screen going here, and I'll see who's got a hand up and try to unmute you. Or you can unmute yourself, in fact. Just and by the way, there is a raise hand function somewhere at the bottom. I think you can somewhere. I don't know where it is, sorry. But anyway, let me make sure I've admitted everybody that's coming in. So yeah, I think Laurie did you put a finger up there, bud?
Yes, my frustration is that we've never been as busy and I don't have enough time in the day to do all the work that I've got to do.
Well, sounds like the perfect opportunity for you to hire somebody that isn't as busy. So anybody in the group that needs a little bit of work, maybe give Laurie a message in the chat box and say, mate, send some of that business my way. I think we're going to hear from Trailminders later as well, who's got something to say about that as well. Who else had a hand up? Did I see any other hands up? Just unmute yourself. You've got the power at the moment. Just unmute yourself and tell us who you are and tell us what your frustration is. Sound like I'm on Talkback Radio. Look like I'm on Talkback Radio. Come on, you guys. Don't be chicken. Take yourself off mute and tell us what's going on out there.
As a filler, I think that's Laurie, I think that's across the board at the moment, and a lot of people are needing a lot of the admin stuff. So I've already been asked if I know anyone. So I'm keeping my eyes peeled.
Good stuff. Thank you, Michelle. Anyone else? Pete, how's Bowel going down there? Is it cold? Got your new fireplace cooking, I think, last time we talked. Yep. It's keeping your house warm.
There you go. Can you hear me all right?
Can do.
Yep. Fantastic. Yeah, it's beautiful down. No, it's not. It's terrible. To say it's beautiful, people will come down the long weekend, spend their money. All the wineries are open.
Hey, have you been to the chocolate shop that's in that little arcade there? Clients of mine own it down there.
Yeah, that's yep. What they call that? Yeah, that's little street, high street. That's open. They've got some great American spices there for your barbecue too.
Oh, they sure do. They sure do. All the American junk food they stock down there. So if anybody wants a road trip when we're allowed to, cross borders again, and you can get across the border to Bowral, go down and check out the chocolate shop.
PJ, it might be interesting for you to know that the Fastlend, a division of Advantage and of course NAB, as from Monday will not be doing any trust loans or multi-security loans. They're only interested now in PAYG loans. Anything that has to do with trusts and or multi-securities has to go direct through the NAB channel. But in saying that, with their owner-occupier, they will accept border income. So the owner-occupier rental generation, they'll take 70% of that for servicing, when there's not many lenders out there that'll do that.
Okay, good tip. And just on that, I mean, have a quick think, guys, if there's any hot tips that anyone has about any lenders, what they're doing. I don't know about you guys, but is anyone else, I'm certainly getting more inquiry from first home buyers. Anyone else seeing similar? Yep, Warren, go ahead. First home buyers. Yeah, you're seeing a lot of first home buyers?
No, actually, because we're not really in the first home owner space, but much like Laurie was saying, I can't remember being as busy in terms of investor inquiry, in terms of whether is this a good time to be investing or not. I think I'm going to get a little moment at some stage today just to talk about a webinar on the findings from our investor panel. The frustration, I guess, in talking about things that are frustrating, PJ, that the first meetings are always a great time to do face-to-face in terms of building rapport, establishing some trust. I miss those face-to-face meetings. But when you're listening to the mainstream media catastrophic predictions of what's going to happen to property, the conversations are very long and hard. But one is able to get them to focus on what is real and what isn't. So we've been unbelievably busy in terms of inquiry. Good.
And of course, for anybody that has any questions about property market and anything else going on, hopefully you'll reserve those for David. I do have some time after David's presentation. If he doesn't answer the question in his presentation, that you'll be able to maybe ask him when he jumps in. So just quickly, guys, just a reminder to all of you who are probably still in your pajamas and haven't turned your video on yet, get that sucker on. I want to see your smiling face. Make sure you're okay and not drinking yet at 10:40 in the morning. Apparently alcohol sales have gone through the roof, understandably. So there you go. Let's see those smiling faces. Hi, Sarah. How you going? Lorraine. Good stuff. Any other frustrations or any other interesting observations that anyone would like to share? Just take yourself off mute and jump in. For a group of finance brokers that would arguably talk the ear off just about anybody at any event, you are all very quiet. Is it still too early? You haven't had enough coffee this morning? Come on. Alvin, what about you, bud? You're on the beach. You've just been chilling. What's going on with you? Getting ready for the end of financial year?
Never been busier. Clients are buying and selling, and it's almost a normal market, slightly discounted for real estate. That's been my experience. But there's tons going on despite the COVID. So we're still getting around those issues, but it's good. But frustrating trying to get loans, COVID loans through the banks. It's just been hopeless. Those guys are going to work with their normal hats on, assessing lending as it would normally be. So I haven't had any success there. Been a waste of time, frankly.
Yeah. And yeah, we were talking about that just a moment ago. It does seem that there are lots of frustrations out there, and I'm sure Zarko will probably have something to say about that, or he might. We'll see. For those that have just joined, that I've just admitted to the room, please do turn your video on, guys, so we can see your lovely smiling faces. And again, make sure you're actually not wearing pajamas. If so, we'll have to say something about that. All right. Well, look, I think if there aren't any other comments, we can probably just kick things along and get started with our industry update. Where is Zarko? There he is. Are you there, Zarko? Can you hear me?
Here. Thank you very much, PJ. Great to see everyone.
You're there, holed up in the MFAA war room in an undisclosed
I am taking advantage of facilities here. So I do share your optimism, PJ, that we may get back face to face for the next meeting, but it will be very different. I mean, you've got to realise with the current reality is that the room we had in Rose Hill, even at the Mercure, won't be the same room we use again. Or if it is, we'll be standing rather than seating 1.5 metres apart. So you've got to think any room that you had in the past that could fit 100 people is now fitting 25 people. So we're going to have to make those adjustments. So whether we're on Zoom for the next one or not, let's hope we're not. But if we are, we'll have to run with that, as it were. And I think one of the things we need to accept as people living through this global pandemic is what we took for granted is no longer available. I think we need to accept that one of the hardest things we're going to have to deal with, and if I share my screen to just show you a couple of things here.
Let me see. I might need to give you screen
fine.
share stuff.
So one of the things that I think we've struggled with is that we don't have a certain pathway through. Yes, we've been given guidelines of what to expect, but we haven't actually been given an exact pathway through. And I think for us, as people functioning in the current environment, that's actually sometimes quite hard to deal with because we don't know what door's the right one to take. So, we've almost become addicted to certainty, to knowing what pathway to take. And as brokers, we're often very black and white in the way we want things to happen. And the reality is we can't rely on that anymore. But what we can rely on is, as an industry, collectively, and you in your individual business, we can rely on people being timely and relevant. So it wasn't that long ago. So if I jumped in my time machine and we all went back to November 2018, the biggest challenge we had in our industry was during the closing days of the Royal Commission into banking, financial services, superannuation, etc. And the battle we had was whether or not brokers earned their trail. And there was a famous exchange between the Royal Commission and representatives of the Commonwealth Bank who said, and I'm paraphrasing here, that trail was money for nothing. If you look at the activity of the last 3 months within finance broking, if you look at the individual activity in your business within the last 3 months, you look at how the number of phone calls you've made to your existing database. You look at the number of offers for help you have made to people within your database. The last 3 months' activity is Exhibit A as to why Trail exists. It might not be the reason Trail was established in the first place, but it's Exhibit A as to the benefit of Trail to the overall system. So when we fast forward 2 years to June 2022, where the whole system will again be up for review, we will now be able to point to these 3 months as a bona fide exhibit of why Trail Commission is good for the system. There has never been a time where brokers and you in your business are more relevant to us, to Australians than now. You have never been more relevant. And the frustrations we've shared about lenders being slow or slower than they need to be to react is almost to our advantage in terms of putting to the forefront that relevance. Now, there is a lot of noise in the marketplace. Now, Warren mentioned there's doomsayers. There's people predicting outlandish claims about a 30% drop in property value in Sydney, as an example. Your clients are going to rely on you to cut through that noise. This is a massive opportunity. We are going to be busier than we've ever been. So we need to be prepared for that. We're going to be doing pro bono work and work where it seems there's no light at the end of the tunnel. But if we continue to be respecting our business and respecting the biggest asset in your business, which is in your database, and having timely and relevant conversations with those people, we're not only going to secure the future of our individual businesses, but we're going to secure the future of the industry as a whole. This is a massive opportunity for us. Now, PJ mentioned before, we've got a speaker coming on talking about Instagram. I'm going to ask you to think about the way you portray value in your business. How do you actually demonstrate value to the outside world? And I've got on the screen a question I use quite a lot, and it came from training I did some time ago, where whenever I'm faced with someone who's looking to me, and looking for me to assist, I use this question: what will help you most right now? And this is a really powerful question to use with your database, because you might not have the answers, but getting them to articulate what will help them helps you both reach a better tomorrow. Now, something that will be a reality tomorrow, it won't necessarily be on the 1st of July as planned, but it will be a reality soon enough, is the best interest duty. And we've talked a little bit about this in previous IFBF meetings. Now, as you may know, we are now looking at implementation of the best interest duty on the 1st of January rather than the 1st of July 2020. It's the 1st of January 2021. Now, the key thing is, as you see on that screen, the best thing we have to go on today is still draft regulatory guides. There is no concrete regulatory guides yet. Now, what do we take from that? We take from that that there is still room for discussion, and we take from that there is still work to be done on the side of the MFAA, the FBAA, and other representatives within our industry, including your aggregators. But I want you to think of what are the opportunities when a best interest duty come in. I want you to keep that in mind as we go through the next 6 months. And we can almost get our businesses best interest duty ready from an opportunity harnessing point of view. Because what we have identified is this is a once in a generation opportunity for you in your individual businesses. And here's why. We have never been able to say to the marketplace, to the people in our database, to the people who like us, trust us, and know us, that we are better than others. We've been able to say we deliver great things, but we've never been able to say we can do this, they can't. With best interest duty, we now can. This is a massive opportunity for you and your business to shout from the rooftops all the things you now must do that other distribution channels don't have to do. And as an example, I wanted to put together some possible marketing slogans you may be able to use come 1st of January 2021 that we've never been able to use before. So for example, we've never been able to use a sentence like this: use one of our mortgage brokers to protect your best interest and put your logo on top of that. Never been able to do that before. We've never been able to say, we proudly act in your best interests. Now that we have a legislative requirement to do so, we can proudly say that using your individual logo. We've never been able to say that all mortgage brokers have a legal duty to put your interests first. So we've never been able to say that we act for you as brokers, but a lender sells you products. Because this is the reality of a best interest duty. This is going to be the distinction between you as a consumer using a broker and you as a consumer using a branch. So there's a massive opportunity for us come the 1st of January 2021. But again, we've got to ask ourselves, how am I currently getting that message out? And the beautiful thing about the IFBF, for the people who are long-time members, you'll know at every meeting, there is someone talking about how to get the message out. As PJ has shared as our host today, today's meeting, we're going to focus on Instagram. So Instagram's a vehicle. But we've had Dilek in the past sharing with you other platforms you can use. So it's time now to start to ask yourself, how am I going to get these messages out to my database firstly, and then the broader community secondly? Because the opportunity to use slogans like this will be a reality come the 1st of January 2021. You will be able to say, put your brand name there, and that your brokers act in your best interest. You'll be able to say that brokers offer choice, experience, and have a legal duty to act in your best interest. This is a once in a generation opportunity to be timely and relevant. Now, the MFAA wants to help you getting the message out as well. So on a fortnightly basis in New South Wales, I have the opportunity to run complimentary workshops that talk about boosting your digital marketing strategy in 8 steps. We've distilled it down to 8 steps we know work for ourselves as people who play in this area and other members that we engage with. The next available session, as you can see, is on Tuesday. I run them fortnightly. If you'd like an invitation, and just ping me for an invitation, whether you're an MFAA member or not, doesn't matter. You can get involved in these sessions. I want to share with you some of the techniques we've seen work for us and work in the past, and there's no better time to start to consider it. Because come 1st of January 2021, as I've talked about before, you will have a once in a generation opportunity to differentiate yourself from the marketplace. Now, even though we're in a time when social interaction has been minimized, we still want to celebrate achievement within our industry. So in terms of excellence is being recognized in 2020 by the MFAA. We've got the MFAA Excellence Awards coming up. As you can see, the dates there. It's a complimentary telecast. So if you want to get involved and you want to support some of the IFBF members that are up for awards, I know PJ's up for an award. I know our sponsors, Prosper, are up for an award. So if you want to get involved, just Google MFAA Excellence Awards and you can register. We've got a professional MC running this show. It's a full showcase of talent interspersed with a bit of recognition of excellence. I encourage you to get involved, and I really encourage you to ask yourself, as we go from effectively the new financial year, which is just around the corner, what do I want to do to be more timely and relevant within my database going forward? So with that in mind, I'd like to throw back to PJ and let's continue with our session today. Thanks, PJ.
Excellent. Thank you, Zarko. I'm just going to, oh, you've killed it yourself. There you go. Yeah. Thank you. That is, once again, a very fantastic presentation from you, Zarko. And I hadn't really been thinking about the best interest duty stuff in that context. So I think you are 100% on the money there. For all of us, we have a unique opportunity now to really say the things that we have always known throughout the last 15 or 20 years of finance and mortgage broking that we haven't really been able to articulate, but now we have legislation where we can just wave it in the face of those who cannot or do not act in the best interest of their clients. So well done, sir. Well done indeed.
No problem.
Thank you. So just real quick, we have a couple more minutes for in Zarko's session. Anybody have any questions? Just raise your hand or take yourself off mute real quick. Any quick questions?
Hey, it's Peter. Zarko, thanks for the information. Do you see any issues in brokers promoting themselves today as acting in the client's best interest?
Yeah, we can't promote it today because we don't have a legal requirement to do so. So as soon as you have a legal requirement to do so, you can point to that legal requirement as proof positive that you have to do it. Today, it's a nice to have, but it's not something you can actually promote as having a legal requirement to do so. You can say we like to put our best interests for clients first, but once it's a legal requirement, you'll be able to promote we have to, and we do.
What about the subtle variation of "we act for you," using that example that you had in your messaging?
Yeah, you could do that. Yeah.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Zarko.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Peter. Okay, cool. Any other questions real quick for Zarko? We got another couple minutes. Anyone else?
Hey, Zarko, when this all does come into place, is there any sort of reference to those slogans? Because there were some good ones there.
Yeah, so what we're looking to do, we've got one set of lawyers to sign off on that, but lawyers are often like trips to the buffet. The second one is always better than the first. So you want to, we want to get a second opinion on that legal advice, and then we're going to put together a pack that you can use to actually use in your individual businesses. Similar to the packs we had when we had the Don't Kill Competition campaign, where there were things that were going out nationally, but we're going to have things that can be used on an individual business level. So watch this space.
They're like a resource.
Exactly right, kits and.
Yes.
And
I did hear Mark
Facebook.
Harron. I heard Mark Harron saying, head of MFAA actually saying, Mr. Felton was telling everybody about their slogans in a connective meeting. So that was a similar, I think there were some similar ones there.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I'll just make a comment. Thank you, Zarko, for the presentation.
No worries, Dilek.
Everyone knows about content that I keep harping on about. Well, here's some content for you. There's a lot of content that Zarko mentioned, even in terms of what you can do now. So if you don't start posting this kind of content, you're missing out. This is like your golden opportunity to stand out. So thank you.
And Dilek raised a really good point. It's getting into the habit of doing it, so when the real opportunity to leverage it comes along, you're not learning it for the first time. This is almost like a training wheels period before the massive opportunity to promote this comes along. So I agree with what Dilek is saying. Let's get it started now so you're ready for first grade when the season starts.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. It is that time now, and Zarko did give a great segue in mentioning Prospa. I'm going to invite Ben to unmute yourself. Ben Howell from Prospa to give us this is our sponsor spotlight section. Give us a little update on what's going on at Prospa and tell us,
Sure. First of all, hi everybody. It's great to be a part of this, and thanks for PJ and the team for putting this on. I think you've done a fantastic job getting, how many people we've got? Like
we have 41 awesome. Moment, 41 in the meeting. So well done. And for those who have just joined, take yourselves off. Put your video on so we can see your smiling, lovely faces.
Look, if I can actually show you video, everyone else can. I've got to head for radio, so come on. All right. So what's happening with Prospa? Look, first of all, we're obviously still funding. We're still here. We're actually seeing things starting to ramp up, which is really, really good. So, as restrictions start to lift a little bit more and more, we'll see a lot more activity. I mean, it's obviously not the same sort of levels as we had prior to COVID-19, but we're seeing some really good signs. Most of you, or a lot of you probably know that we've been given access to the government guarantee scheme. So just to give you a bit of an update in that regard, we are currently still in the development phase of these products, and I'm hoping that we'll have something rolled out to market within a few weeks. So when they're available, we'll certainly let you know and give you all the relevant information so guys can get cracking on that. But look, we are still lending with our original products. So and in theory, we can actually lend to pretty much every industry that's not on our usual banned list. Just to let you guys know this, But look, bear in mind that there are some industries that are obviously in better shape than others. So still pretty cautious in regards to that. So, but what's really working with a lot of brokers at the moment is finding out additional information about how they've been impacted from COVID-19, or what have they changed within their business to counteract, mitigate those challenges. So, look, it's the more information, the better. And once we have that information, we can. Sorry, I've just got my daughter rocking up. Thanks, Maddie. Hi, come here real quick. Say hi to everybody.
The joys of being at home, isn't that? I'm sure that's happened a lot.
Yeah, sorry guys.
That's okay.
She just came back from the park, so she's all excited. So, excuse me. Do you mind? All right. Go on. Sorry guys. Pop back to me, please. Come on. I feel like that Channel 7 report. Come on.
Yeah.
I'm on a video.
That's all right. Put her on your lap and,
Sorry, guys. So the more information, the better. And the most important thing that I can say to you guys is that if you do have a customer there that does require funding, ask some more questions. Like we can still take a name and a number and do all the work for you, so that's easy. But in terms of speaking to your customers, it's really important to actually ask questions about how they've been impacted by COVID-19, how they're going to bounce back. What things have they changed within their business, and how they foresee the next sort of 6 or so months coming through. So, but guys, can't stress enough that if you do have a scenario, give your Prosper BDM or myself a call. Obviously, we're happy to talk through any scenario that you may have. And as I said, guys, like things are starting to ramp up. So stay positive, because I honestly think that next 6 months are going to be very, very busy for everybody. So watch your space, I guess.
Awesome. Thank you. Are there any industries, Ben, that you guys are not too keen on at the moment?
To be honest, it's more so the ones that are on our banned list previously. So the ones that, just to rattle off a couple, so like property developers, adult industry, those sorts of industries. So for you guys, look, if you guys need it, reach out to me and I can provide you with our excluded industry list. But essentially it's the same list that we had prior to COVID. One thing or a couple of things I'll mention is, as I said before, like information is key. So those industries, for example, that are essential, pretty solid businesses, right? You can sort of think that, okay, they've had a pretty good time through this COVID-19 period, although some still have been impacted with foot traffic going down, like medical centres, even though they're essential, still been impacted by foot traffic, not as much foot traffic. But look, even like hospitality and retail, there's a lot of different types of businesses in those segments. So, and we're still funding those businesses, but remember, it is case by case. So that's why it's really important to sort of have a chat to your BDM and go through that scenario. And we can give you, like, set the right expectations. Say, look, number one, can we do it? And number two, where we think they're going to land. So, as I said, it's case by case basis. Still very unknown sort of areas at the moment, right? So it's really important to uncover that information. So whatever business it is, ask the right questions about how they've been impacted and essentially how they're going to get out of this. Okay.
Awesome. Very good. Thank you, Ben.
My pleasure.
Very timely. Appreciate it, guys. Obviously, you should be out there having conversations, particularly reaching out to your small business clients. I think that goes without saying, that this is a great opportunity to reach out to anybody that you haven't had an opportunity to chat with in a while. And of course, thinking about any accountants that you might have in your network that you might not have talked to in a while. I know I've spoken to a couple in my network who have asked me questions about what's going on in lending land, things like that. So great opportunity to do that. I'm sure you're all doing that anyway. For those that have just joined us, welcome, guys. Sorry, I'm trying to be on the switch and do everything else and get you admitted. So please do turn your video on so we can see your smiling, happy faces. Now, next cab off the rank in our lender, or sponsor, I should say, sponsor spotlight, get it right, PJ, is Andrew Greatbatch from BrokerPad. Where are you, Andrew? There you are. Go ahead and unmute. I'll unmute you. You need to unmute yourself. There you go. Can't hear you. Can't hear you. Technical difficulties. Yep. Where'd he go? Well, he's disappeared. Nope, still can't hear you. You're muted, so you need to unmute yourself. I'll try to unmute you.
Was it just me, or did we just have a bit of a slowdown on the connection?
Don't know.
It's just you.
Yeah, that'd be right. Thank you.
So Andrew, we still can't hear you, bud. I don't know what's going on. Why don't you sort that out and give me a message in the instant message when you? It's saying.
How about that?
Oh, there you go.
There we go.
You're not in charge of a tech company, are you?
No, actually, I'm not. Nothing to. I know nothing about tech.
Clearly, no. I'm kidding. Go. What's happening at BrokerPad? What's going on in your world? Tell us how BrokerPad is helping brokers do their job even better.
Look, it's really interesting through this COVID time. What we found is that initially there was a big drop-off. We can actually see how many emails go out. And initially there was a drop-off, and now there's more emails going out of the system than we've ever had. And I guess our number of subscribers is probably up 15 to 20% in the last 2 months. And I think it's because people can't actually go and meet with their clients, so they're looking for an online solution. So for those who don't know what BrokerPad does, we basically have a way of collecting data and documents from clients, and it does a lot of the automation for that. So can I just share my screen for a second?
Let me put you in charge. Don't abuse it. Hang on. How do I do this again? Let me make you the host, and boom. There you go. Share your screen.
Hold on, let me see if I can do that. There, see that? Okay, share that. So I'm talking to brokers every day, and the number one thing they're talking to me about is how difficult it is to collect information and documents, and it's like they're in a hot paddock trying to cut wheat with a scythe, you know. And what we come along and do basically is offer them a combine harvester. So they send links out to all their customers, and they basically it basically gets the customers a way of easily entering their data and documents. So that's particularly what it does. One of the big time savers that they love is the way that it renames all the documents. If you've got 2 applicants, they might have 20 documents. And if you've got to rename those manually, it can take up to an hour, whereas BrokerPad will do that literally in 5 seconds. So that's a huge thing. The other thing they love is, and what I'm finding, we did if you go into our YouTube channel, I did an interview with a lady called Amy Small. She's a connected broker in Newcastle. So if you go to YouTube, search on BrokerPad, go to our channel. It's the very last video that's up there. And this lady, I call her the social media queen. And she's basically given us a step-by-step blueprint of how to do social media. So it probably works in quite well with what you're looking at doing, Zarko. But really, really good. I don't know if everyone can do what she does. She does videos all the time. She's got 20,000 people and she does that. But she uses we have a thing called, if you can see here, it's this lead capture form. So you put a link to your website, Facebook page, to a Facebook ad, to a Google ad, to an email campaign, and it's a link. They click on that link and they tell you what they want in terms of whether they want to buy a house, a refinance, a construction loan, whatever. And then it basically adds that client to BrokerPad, and from there you can just send out a link to collect all the information and documents. And it integrates really nicely into Facebook because you can use pixel codes in there. And what Facebook does with that, it helps you to actually Facebook builds a profile of your ideal customer, and then it makes your advertising much more effective. And then you can also retarget those same people at the same time. So if you build up an audience with social media posting, she's saying that every video she puts up, she'll get a lead. In fact, she says she's getting so many leads through the lead capture form, she had to turn off her advertising because she was getting too busy, basically. The other thing, and I know I've got a very short amount of time, we have just released a new product called PlannerPad. And it's like BrokerPad, but for financial planners. And I know PJ's using it at the moment. I think it's working okay. So basically, the difference between BrokerPad and PlannerPad is that it's a lot more tailored to the needs of financial planners. So it talks a lot more about superannuation insurances, more about risk tolerances, and so on. So it does a lot more. It's got more questions there that are relevant for financial planners. Do you have a comment on how it works for you, PJ?
Yeah, I do. I was just going to say, as you're wrapping up there, that both the BrokerPad and PlannerPad products are awesome. There is no chance I'm ever going to go back to handing someone a piece of paper or emailing them a form ever again to fill out. It's all done electronically and digitally, and it just works. And it's a great hurdle. If people don't do it, they don't do business with me. So I love it.
Great. All right. I will stop sharing. Thanks. That's about all from me.
Awesome.
One last thing. You can actually go to plannerpad.com.au if you want to try that out. It's a free trial.
Cool. That's and that's really useful, guys. Take advantage of the free trial. Andrew is very good, and BrokerPad and PlannerPad have been great with me about taking feedback on any enhancements that they should make to their product and getting them worked in there. So you know, they're a fantastic group to work with. Now, where is young Frank? He's disappeared on me. He's been up and down and getting his room ready, opening the shades, shutting it, trying to find the right light to bounce off that gorgeous face. Unmute yourself, buddy. There he is. Okay. Mate, tell us all about Trailminders, what's going on at Trailminders. And I think there's also a competition or something really exciting that you have to announce to us today. So the floor is yours. You need the screen, Frank, or are you just going to?
I think we'll just have a little chat because that's about the limit of my technical experience. Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. Just great that you've been able to get this together, PJ. And as we get a bit more traffic in it and a bit more experience in it, I might even be able to do a few fancy tricks. But at the moment, it's just a chat. Hi, everybody. We've got a couple of things happening at Trailminders, as you probably know by now, or for those who don't. We're in two corners, two separate services. One is for brokers heading for retirement who would like to sort of put their feet up, go out and have some fun. We can, rather than have a broker sell the book, we can manage their book for them. All they do is arrange with their aggregator. The Trailminders will be running the book, and the aggregator still sends 80% of the annual trail direct to, the monthly trail direct to the resting broker, as we call them, even though they stop all their accreds and CPD and all of that and get out and party. We had one resting broker who booked a place in the middle of Paris in 2017 and lived there for 6 months. Can you pick that one up? I haven't done it myself. But anyway, yes, stunning opportunity. He's a bit bored at the moment, let me tell you. He can't go anywhere, but that'll happen. And in fact, they say it's an ill wind, you see, and what's happened with this particular broker is he's realised that if he can't go anywhere, why shouldn't he be looking to fire up his database that he's not really been directly serving for nearly 5 years now. And we're talking to him about a concept within Trailminders called Trail Builders, where we're now working with him to see investment property opportunities and so on. Because of his knowledge with his client base, he can work with us to get some more activity going to boost the wealth of his clients, and of course that transfers itself into his trails. So that's an opportunity we're working with him tomorrow on, in fact, to kickstart the Trail Builders concept in a database of 400 people. So we're going to be busy with that. And the other area of our activity is for active brokers. Peter Bryant at Valve suggested that because we have to run a broking service to do what we do for the resting guys, we can be offering a virtual PA style service for active brokers like every one of you listening in. So instead of getting yourself bogged down with all the crap of the business, that's a technical term, the opportunity is there to farm it out to what Trailminders provide as a virtual PA service. So we can do processing for you, we can make telemarketing operations and all sorts of side things that keep you away from kissing the babies and writing more loans. Now, one of those services is a thing called our scenario service, because just to find some calm time when the phone's not ringing to study what might be the best lender to go to for a particular client scenario, it's often hard to find the time. So, and the free brain space. So we can offer a simple scenario service where you send us the details and we come back to you with the three best funders who are likely to welcome the deal. And that, of course, bolts in nicely to your compliance requirements anyway. Now, just to add the fun, here's the clincher. We up on our website. I'm not sure it's actually up yet, so it might have to go up this afternoon, to be quite honest. You can put your details into the Trailminders website during the next 4 weeks, and at our next IFBF meet, we'll announce 3 of the lucky entrants who will get a free scenarios opportunity. So that will happen during the month of July then. So sometime in the next few weeks, look up the Trailminders website and you'll see the competition there to to win a scenario service to get one of your deals looked at without you having to think about it. Thank you, PJ. That's about it. If anybody wants to come back to me, then I'm sure the website will get you through to us, trailminders.com.au. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Frank. And just on the scenario service that, you just slip that in there right at the end. Do you just want to quickly tell us what that entails? Like what exactly is it that you're going to be doing with that, and how does it work?
Yes, again, we're all pressed for time and brain space, so it's often difficult to just find a clear space to sit and think about what a particular client's deal needs, which funder might be a starter for this, and then in a sub-filter of that, what are the better funders for it? So we all know this is a complicated and complex business, so you can farm that out to us. Typically for a resi job, it's an hour's service for about $60. So it's not going to break the bank. And if it gets you served up in a timely manner, 3 top funders who are likely to welcome your deal, then it means that you've met your compliance and you can get underway quickly to get the loan into the system. And you can do that yourself, or you can hire us to do that, of course. So you could just use us for just the scenario thing. You send us the detail of what deal you've got on the table. We'll be back to you within a couple of hours of receiving the info with suggestions of who are the best funders to offer that to.
Very good. That sounds great. I know that's certainly something at the moment for me. Just sitting here trying to think through scenario stuff has been difficult. So I think $60 sounds like a bargain, if you ask me. I'm sure all of you have an hourly rate that's well north of $60 an hour. Now, just one final question for you, Frank. I think I've heard through the grapevine that you guys are really quite busy, and you were potentially looking to offer some help, not some help, sorry, get some help. So there's an offer potentially for our network. If anyone has a bit of downtime, they might avail themselves of an opportunity. So tell us about that.
Fantastic. Thank you, PJ. I completely forgot that. And
mate, that's why I'm the chairman, mate.
You're the boss. Yes,
I don't let these things slip through, but
our traffic management lady would be on the phone in 5 minutes saying, "What the heck?" She did suggest that we're getting some quite snowed under in this active broker services now, and brokers who are doing quite serious volumes are chucking a lot of the stress over to us. So particularly connective brokers, people who like to use Mercury, we've got an opportunity to offer you purely on an ad hoc basis some calm, regular income that would simply be handling processing needs for particularly for Mercury brokers, because that's where our stress is at the moment. But always happy to hear from anyone who perhaps it is a broker and therefore has the knowledge and would like to work with us on a simple hourly contract. It doesn't get in the way of you doing your broking in any way. But yes, we would love to hear from a couple of people who are have some available time and would like to help us processing the connective Mercury sort of stuff. Thank you, PJ.
My pleasure. No, that's great. So guys, obviously there's an opportunity there if you are maybe in that early stage of your business still, or growing it, or anything, you know, that if you have time to fill and want to earn some cash, well, give Frank a bell. You know where to find him. I don't know what happened to Zoe. Frank, I just, a parrot apparently has taken her place. So I don't know what's going on at your house. Anyway, mate, guys, with that, I'm going to give us a 5-minute break. We're going to be welcoming David Bassanese shortly. So everybody grab a quick cuppa, go to the toilet, whatever, and we'll see you back here at 11:30.
You sure? All right. So would you like me to plow ahead?
Plow ahead, kick off.
Right,
tell us what's going on around the world, in our economy, everything else. How does David Bassanese see the world right now?
No worries. All right. Thanks guys for the opportunity. So let me just run through a few things. Obviously, in terms of the market and economic outlook, the coronavirus situation, I mean, people often are, you know, what's your view on the economy? And I say, what really depends on your view on the virus. You know, are we going to have second waves? What's the extent of, asymptomatic cases? There's a lot of variables. You almost got to be an expert on viruses to have any strong view on the economy. But I'll share with you my thinking as I've gleaned and how that relates to the economy and also to the financial markets. So firstly, just as a backdrop, where we are, why the virus is doing what it's, why it's basically devastated the global economy in the past few months. I mean, here's a history of pandemics. Obviously, I've even got the Black Death, back in the 1300s, but more relevant is, I guess, the Spanish flu, the Asian flu, the Hong Kong flu, and the swine flu. These are the previous 4 pandemics over the past 100 years. They did, have quite a big impact on in terms of infection rates. But the death rates, certainly since the Spanish flu, have been small enough that they haven't required, governments to sort of lock down their economies in a serious way. The last sort of serious lockdowns really were back, you have to go, open the history books and look at what countries did during the Spanish flu of 1918. So the nature of a pandemic is that it has a quite, it's easy to catch. So it can have quite widespread effects in terms of, people being affected by it. But the other variable, of course, is the incidence of hospitalization rates and death rates. And so, unfortunately, the coronavirus is as contagious as previous pandemics, but the death rate is close, probably not as bad ultimately as the Spanish flu. The experts suggest the death rate with the Spanish flu was about 5%. This time around, the ratio of deaths to those infected, at least according to the official numbers, is about 6% even today. But again, a number of those deaths were caused in areas where hospital systems were overrun. People weren't able to get the medical treatment they need. The experts suggest the death rate is probably closer to 1% at this rate, which is still significantly above what we saw with the Asian flu, Hong Kong flu, and the swine flu. And so that's sort of why we're in this situation we're in at the moment. If you look at the rate of daily cases around the world, you can see the big ramping up through March, particularly in March into April. which is really what caused the lockdowns and caused equity markets to sell off in a big way. But even today, look, yes, it's flattened off, but the rate of daily new cases around the world is still relatively high. Like, it hasn't come off a lot. What we've seen is the incidence has shifted. So it started in Asia and China in particular, moved across to Europe, then into the United States, which obviously the global markets are most concerned about. It's starting to taper off a little bit in the United States, and now starting to ravage the emerging market economies, particularly Brazil and Russia. But overall, as you can see globally, it's still with us, and at a stubbornly high rate. If you look at it by countries, so this is a rolling 7-day average of new cases. And again, some of these numbers are being influenced by the fact that testing has ramped up. So, as people say in the US, yes, they've got a lot of cases still, but they're also testing a lot. But nonetheless, as you can see, the US curve in particular has flattened off, but it's still, running at you would argue, still uncomfortably high levels. It certainly hasn't been contained in the way that China seems to have contained it, and certainly Australia and New Zealand. In countries such as Italy, Spain, the drop-off rate has been somewhat sharper, which is great news. But that's the situation in terms of the developed markets. So again, if you look at it, countries are now starting to slowly open up, particularly the US. At a time where experts still suggest, they don't really have the virus under control yet. So they are at the risk of, second waves or having, new cases. But the reality is the political situation, the political pressure to open up is so intense that, they've I guess, felt the need to move. And certainly in states like New York and California and Washington State, where they do at least appear to have got the first wave under control, there is a scope to open up their cities again. But elsewhere in the United States, it's certainly an open question. In Florida, Texas, some of the more sort of inner states at the moment. Australia and New Zealand, as you can see by global standards, we've done very, very well. Puts us in a good position. But again, we're moving through our winter months, which means that we're probably going to remain pretty cautious. Again, the evidence is mixed, but the fear is that these viruses are easier to transmit during the cooler months versus the summer months, which are in the Northern Hemisphere now. So that's why we're probably going to remain pretty diligent. This is really the snapshot of the global market situation. This is a global composite PMI. And again, it's an index of business sentiment or business conditions across manufacturing and services, across all major areas like Europe, the United States, Asia. And just to show you the sheer plummet really in terms of activity numbers in April and May relative to the past two global recessions during the GFC and then 01, 2000, 2001, obviously quite a sharp downturn. Suffice to say, this is not just a recession at the moment, it's effectively a depression. It's the worst economic condition since the Great Depression. But the big if and the big hope, and I think it is likely, it's not going to last as long as the Great Depression, thank goodness. I mean, it's going to be the sharpness of this descent will be short-lived. Things will start to recover. In fact, they are starting to recover. But the big debate now is, the shape of that recovery. How quickly can we get back to normal? And the reality is, I think that, we're still going to be in pretty weak conditions for a while, albeit the rate of improvement, the rate of change will improve. If you go from complete lockdown to at least partially opening up your economy, clearly there'll be an improvement in some of those numbers. But the overall level of activity could still be quite subdued relative to what we were enjoying before the virus, ravaged the global economy. This is an example of the sort of data we're seeing in Australia. This is employment to population ratio in Australia. So the April, big drop. So the April labour market numbers that came out, we had 600,000 people, lose their jobs. The unemployment rate only went up to 6.2%, which was because 500,000 people basically said that, yes, we don't have a job, but we're not even bothering to look for a job at the moment. And as a result, they weren't defined as in the labour force. And so as a result, weren't defined as unemployed. So that prevented the unemployment rate from going up even higher. And what effectively happened, we had a big increase in the non-participation rate. But effectively, the unemployment rate in Australia today is probably closer to, say, 15% than the 6.2% officially recorded. And again, that will start to improve. And I've got some, but even in 3 to 6 months' time, it's probably likely to be still, relatively high. And I think the actual recorded unemployment rate is probably going to push up to, say, 10% over the next few months, and then come down to, say, 8% or so by year end, but still, would be higher than what we've had. And for some of the reasons I'll touch on in a minute. In terms of the virus, there's been a lot of hopes in terms of vaccines. If you're following the markets on a daily basis, equity markets have bounced on a number of reports of trials going ahead. But at the moment, the bottom line is there's still no silver bullet in terms of a drug vaccine or even an effective treatment that can greatly reduce the risk of death for those that have been severely affected by the virus. So one particular result that came out a few weeks ago that caused the markets to get quite excited, the remdesivir is a treatment. And as you can see, the results, yes, for those that have taken the drug versus those who are on a placebo, there was a statistical improvement in terms of lower people with severe cases ended up dying. But nonetheless, it was a fairly marginal result. So it's, again, not the silver bullet. But again, if those that are severely affected by by coronavirus taking this drug at the margin does reduce their chances of speeds their recovery, reduces the chances of death, but nonetheless, it only marginally relative to the situation of not taking it. And more recently, there was a virus, and there's many groups around the world that are working feverishly on developing a vaccine, no question. And we're hearing reports, now and again, of early trial results. But again, I'm not a scientist, but what I understand is there's a big leap to go from early results to actually have a vaccine that is readily available. A lot can go wrong in those trials. So again, the bottom line is vaccines aren't going to save us, at least for the next 3 to 6, possibly 12 months in terms of having to deal with this virus. That then leads to the risk of second waves. And so I've got some charts there of the situation with the 1918 Spanish flu that in England and Wales. And you can see they had the first wave in late 1918, and then a second wave kicked in 2019. And I've got a chart there from Sydney as well that I've been able to dig up where you saw 2 waves. And in fact, so Spanish flu famously did have a second wave. Now, part of that was with the return of soldiers from the war. So there is they had various, as we understand it, this virus was sort of developed due to the, terrible conditions during World War I. And then as soldiers came back from the front, that sparked the virus in other countries around the world. But if you look at even things like the Hong Kong flu, the Asian flu of the 50s and 60s, and the swine flu, and again, not as serious, but nonetheless, you did get waves of the virus going through communities. So if you're a betting person, chances are that we will get a second wave of the coronavirus. The only issue is, will it be widespread enough to force lockdowns, or will there just be clusters of cases that maybe require more local lockdowns, or they're able to sort of trace and quarantine those that are affected? But we are, even in China today, you're hearing reports of like clusters of outbreaks in certain cities, and they've been, reclosing down parts of their economy as a result, but it hasn't been the widespread shutdowns. But again, it remains a risk. And if you're thinking about the economic outlook, even if you don't get a second wave or a significant second wave, just the mere risk of it, I think, will lead consumers to be cautious. It will lead governments to be, cautious in removing all restrictions, which again will limit the extent to which you can get a V-shaped economic recovery if many social distancing restrictions are still in place. and also business investment plans. And again, this is a big driver of the economy, is the extent to which businesses are prepared to invest into the future. And we're seeing business investment plans having been cut back over the last few months. Yesterday, we got a capital expenditure survey in Australia that showed a big downgrade to the investment outlook for next year. And again, just given the uncertainty of this virus, it's hard to see a case where businesses would be, spending as much as they previously anticipated. So that's another case to suggest, unfortunately, that, the recovery, could be somewhat muted. If you look at these are some scenarios from the Reserve Bank of Australia. And again, given the uncertainty, they've basically looked at where they've got a baseline scenario, then a downside and upside. So even in an upside, yes, growth does start to recover quite nicely from the middle of this year. But even by 2022, we're sort of not back to where we would have otherwise been in terms of GDP. And the baseline suggests even, a slower recovery. And I guess one way that, to really understand this is to focus on the unemployment rate. And as you can see there, that even in the baseline scenario, and that is with restrictions being removed more or less completely by the end of the September quarter, restrictions on international travel still remaining in place for a year. But then, and businesses and consumers, spending again, but still somewhat cautiously. This time next year, the unemployment rate probably still around 7.5% to 8% versus, the 6% or so that we're at the moment. So the good news is, yes, in terms of the rate of change, we are probably near the bottom. Things will start to look better. But again, in terms of financial markets, at least, the disappointment may well be is after that initial bounce of the data. And again, things like retail sales, which have plummeted in the last couple of months, will naturally bounce in June and July. But thereafter, it may be somewhat more muted. And that's where, and then you've got the US going into its winter period where it will be susceptible to the virus again, where, you could see at least a reappraisal by the market, given its very furious rebound. In fact, if you look at the market, just before I focus on the market, some things to bear in mind. So how is this situation different from, say, the GFC? Firstly, the speed of the market decline has been incredibly fast. We basically had a 35% drop in the market within a few weeks. That took, a year or so to happen during the GFC. And so the rebound has been very furious. Net, one way to think about this is we're basically down about 15% from our highs, allowing for the slump and the rebound 2 months into a recession, which is basically where we, is a more reasonable sort of situation to say. We're 2 months into a recession of uncertain, severity, and the markets are about 10 to 15% off their highs. Now, if it becomes an extended severe recession, the market will probably drop down somewhat more from having only gone down 15%. So that's sort of almost the way I'm thinking about it now. The severity of the drop was too fast, and the rebound has sort of restored an element of normality, but nonetheless, we're still down from our highs, and I think unlikely to break above those highs. And again, one of the challenges for the market will be this backward-looking recession, as I mentioned, where typically in a recession, things start getting gradually weaker and weaker and weaker, then things bottom out, and then things recover. This time around, the worst of it is really right up front. It's a backwards recession. And so we're at the worst point already. In fact, we're probably past the worst point. And then now things will start to recover. But we're recovering from an incredibly weak position relative to typical recessions. Such that, as I said, if you think about the US, for example, the US, at its recession worst, the unemployment rate peaked at 10%. Today, the unemployment rate is about 14%, probably going to hit 20% over the next few months. And by year end, probably will still be at 10% on a best case scenario. So that is still, at its peak during the GFC. Unlike the GFC, stimulus has been a lot more forthcoming. Again, the GFC, there was a question of it was investment banks getting themselves in trouble. There was a reticence to provide a lot of stimulus to sort of bail out Wall Street, as it was called. Whereas this time, given it was undeserved, I mean, the shutdowns were forced upon businesses because of the virus. And so governments have been a lot more forthcoming in providing stimulus. But I would also say it's because the severity of the downturn has also been pretty bad. And the other interesting feature is that the tech sector, and I'm talking about things like Google, Amazon, and Facebook in the US, which have been the major boom sector really during the bull market, just so happen to have been the companies least affected by the shutdowns. In fact, some of them positively affected. If you think about Amazon, Netflix, and whatnot, with people staying at home. So that's helped support the market as well. So the tech sector has held up, and it's actually rebounded pretty well over the last couple of months. But again, even the tech sector ultimately it is relying on advertising for revenue. And if consumer spending is going to be sluggish, if companies do cut back their advertising budgets, their earnings will be affected, albeit not as bad as, obviously, cruise lines and retailers and whatnot, but nonetheless, they will still be affected. Looking at the market, so this is a US S&P 500 index. And again, just the sheer severity of that downturn in March. And we've had a gradual, we've gone up in fits and starts ever since. So we've recovered more than half of that decline. And we're actually just in recent days poked above the 200-day moving average. But yeah, so, people are getting more and more confident about this recovery. I am still somewhat cautious. Whether we revisit the lows, open-minded about, it's maybe less clear that we can go all the way back to those lows and go lower, but I certainly think I wouldn't be chasing the market at these levels. And if anything, we're probably due for a decent correction back. Maybe not immediately, because the flow of news is still positive with economies opening up. And as I said, you'll get an initial bounce in the data. But later in the year, as we start to question the strength of that recovery, when economic data actually starts to matter again, and the US goes into its winter, maybe where the market does maybe have a bit more of a correction. Australian market, same sort of situation. We were actually in a range there coming out of in part of that rebound, and again, just in recent days have broken out somewhat higher, led by the banks. So the banks, funnily enough, have really been laggards in this recovery, but in the last few days at least have bounced quite strongly. Some are suggesting it's month-end window dressing. Fund managers want to be seen to have participated in the rally, and so they're buying up stocks to make their portfolios look good at at month-end. But anyway, that's the situation in terms of the rebound. But again, I'm still somewhat cautious about the strength of that rebound. Aussie dollar, it's really tracked the global markets pretty closely, so it has had a nice rebound. But again, if I'm right and I think market's going to start to top out here and maybe pull back over the next few months, then the Aussie's probably going to do the same. And I see it going back to, say, the low 60-cent level from where it is at the moment, rather than push up over 70 cents from where it is. Gold is consolidating, but it's been in a longer-term uptrend. I still like gold as a diversifier within portfolios. I think very low global interest rates are going to support gold prices over the next year. So even in a risk-off environment, gold, will be a go-to asset. But even if, as we gradually get recovery through 2021, with interest rates remaining low, central banks keeping interest rates low, possibly by monetizing debt, buying up some of government debt as it's being issued by governments, that will be supportive of gold prices. And this is ultimately a challenge for markets. I just quickly talk through this a little bit. Back at the market highs, focus on the US market. Forward, when you hear something like price to forward earnings is a weighted average measure of calendar year earnings for the current year and for next year. So it's like it's a way of sort of having a forward-looking view of earnings. And the weight on next year's earnings, the weight on this year's earnings is basically the number of months remaining in the year divided by 12. So for halfway through the year, the weight on 2020 would be 50%. And the weight on 21 will be 50%. And as we get to the year end, forward earnings as measured will be actually will all be expected earnings for calendar year 2021 in the case of the US. Australia's slightly different because our financial years are on a end of June basis. But if you just focus on the US market, the price to forward earnings ratio at year end will be what the markets expect earnings to be at that point for 2021. And at the moment, as you can see, it's come down from 192 to 161. And I think by August, it's going to be down to 127. So you are seeing significant earnings downgrades. So even at current prices, that would put the market on a PE ratio of around about 18 to 20 times earnings. And if you look at it from a forward earnings basis, by around August, let's assume the markets have priced this in by August, or analysts have revised down their earnings by that extent, forward earnings will be about 120. So around about 3,000 on the S&P. That would give you a forward price to forward earnings ratio of about 25, which again is a level we haven't seen since the dot-com bubble. So that's going to be a challenging valuation. And one of the bull cases is the fact that, so 25 times earnings, this is where the US market in terms of a price to forward earnings ratio has been over the past 50 years relative to 10-year bonds. So again, at the moment, it's around about 21 times earnings. It's even higher than it was at the market peak back in January. But, you know, the bulls will argue that's justified potentially given very low interest rates. So what we've seen is 10-year bond yields have gone from around about 2% at the end of last year now to only around 0.5%, given the easing in monetary policy. And again, from a very broad run perspective, you could possibly say 20 times earnings is reasonable if with bond yields at 0.5%. But again, I would still say that's fairly stretched. And even if 20 is reasonable, 25 times earnings, as I think where we will get to, is arguably not reasonable, even with interest rates as incredibly low as they currently are. And I said the last time the US market was trading at 25 times earnings was back during the late 1990s, 2000, which was clearly a bubble in valuations. And so in terms of the recovery, I mean, some of the, you know, you've probably heard of a different the alphabet in terms of, you know, U-shape, V-shape, L-shape. Really, to get a V-shaped type recovery, which is what the market's essentially counting on, you need the restrictions to be removed very quickly and things to get back to normal. And again, we're not seeing much evidence of that at the moment. Things are opening up, but there are still a lot of social distancing restrictions in place. International travel restrictions are still in place. And so that in and of itself limits the degree to which the economy can bounce back. On top of that, you know, the second wave risks, if you do get a second wave, that would suggest, you know, the recovery would be even more thwarted. And even if you don't get a second wave, as I said earlier, the concern is that businesses and households will just remain fairly cautious until such time, for example, as a vaccine is readily available, because we're always face that risk of a second wave. So markets are counting on a V-shaped type recovery. More likely, it's going to be something else. Probably a L-shape is the worst case, where basically you get repeat second waves and repeat lockdowns for a year or two, which would be absolutely disastrous. But more of an L or, you know, a U-shaped recovery is where things bottom out, but the recovery is somewhat gradual. A W-shaped recovery is one where, you know, this is what we may actually see, is where you do get an initial bounce after a very weak Q2. So Q3, September quarter, is stronger, and that's what the markets are sort of counting on at the moment. But then the reality is that after that initial bounce, spending you know, levels out at a more subdued pace, and then we basically don't get a decent recovery until 2021, when we get you know, when we're more assured of a vaccine is on the table. So that's like you know, the situation at the moment. I mean, markets are very hopeful. I think they're starting to have some valuation concerns because of they're counting on that V-shaped recovery. But we're in the hands of the virus, and history suggests you can't discount second waves. And given that, even if you don't get one, businesses and consumers are likely to remain fairly cautious for the foreseeable future. Is really you know, the sort of reality as I'm seeing it. So I think I'll leave it at that. Happy to, you know, take any specific questions if you have them. But I'd like to be more upbeat than I am, but I'm trying to be realistic. We are in the middle of a probably the most biggest economic shock the global economy has faced since the Great Depression. Let's be under no illusion. And social distancing restrictions are being only gradually lifted.
Thank you very much, David. That was awesome and very insightful as always. I do have a question. I've got a couple questions in the queue. And if anyone does have any questions for David after that presentation, please just drop them in the queue and I'll grab them. The question I wanted to ask you was about the Australia-China relationship. So we know that Trump's going to have a press conference tomorrow at some stage, and there's obviously some more argy-bargy going on between the U.S. and China. What impact do you think and another breakout in a trade war or whatever it is that they're doing might have on Australia?
Look, obviously not helpful. I mean, China, irrespective of what the US is doing, China seems to have, playing a bit of hardball with Australia. They've obviously restricted they've slapped on tariffs on some exports, for example, barley. They're questioning whether or not we're dumping barley into the US, into the Chinese market, which we are disputing. They sort of providing regulatory roadblocks, I guess, trying to frustrate us a little bit, just to remind us how important they are as a trading partner. So they are being a little bit, problematic in that front. But I just in terms of that, I still ultimately don't believe China's going to engage in a full-blown trade war with us because, ultimately they do need a lot of our imports. Iron ore is pretty integral to their steel production. We have very good quality, low-cost iron ore. Their iron ore is pretty poor quality. So it wouldn't be helpful for them to sort of, basically abandon iron ore, for example. In terms of the US, ultimately, I'm making a judgment that the US obviously Trump is, rattling the sabers a little bit with China at the moment, given what's happened with the virus. There's anger about, arguably China didn't contain the virus or tell us enough about it early enough. And so he's, rightly or wrongly, reinstigating issues with China. But ultimately, I don't think he's going to take it too far because as we're seeing overnight, for example, reinstigation of trade wars, Wall Street doesn't like that. And I think ultimately Trump will make the judgment that he'd rather support Wall Street if he can, rather than go down hard on China, because if that risks the rally in the market by going hard on China, I think that's where he'll draw the line. So he'll do a few things, but not enough to risk a major correction on Wall Street, which may happen irrespective of what he does, as I said, for other reasons. But I don't think he'd want the trade wars to be the reason for that. So.
Good. All right. Well, we'll stay tuned on that one because, of course, we have an election year too, and I think both Biden and Trump are rattling the sabers, as it were.
Yes.
I'll ask you one final question because then we do need to move on to our final guest today. But just before I ask the question, David, thank you again on behalf of the IFBF for giving your time to present on what's happening in the economy. Really do appreciate it. A lot of our brokers, obviously, are having conversations with their clients, and this sort of information would certainly help their narrative with the things that they're out there talking with them about. So the final question I wanted to ask you is around JobKeeper. We had a question from one of our steering committee members. The JobKeeper, I think, stops in or around September. Do you see any, big impact as a result of the withdrawal of that sort of support from the government on our economy and on our recovery?
Yeah, look, I think it will have some impact. I mean, if we're in that grey area where we are having recovery, but it's not that fantastic, I think the government will still, wean ourselves off that. I mean, they've increased the payments on effectively increased unemployment benefits, for example, and they're going to cut that back. I think that's likely. Cut back some of the subsidies they're offering businesses. But look, what we've seen in recent over the past week, for example, is they've actually now they've got $60 billion. They're actually not going to spend $60 billion that they thought they were going to spend, because we've managed to tackle the virus more quickly than we expected. They were budgeting, to have a lot of payments for 6 months or so. So ultimately, if pulling it back does lead to, if there is a risk of a derailing of the recovery, I think they'll extend it. I mean, because I don't think I don't think there's any budgetary limits at the moment for them to extend it if they need to. So ultimately, I'm not too worried about the removal of that stimulus, because if they need to, they'll keep it in place.
Awesome. Very good. Well, once again, thank you very much for insightful as always, and sorry about the little technical difficulties we had there.
Well,
but
I'm sorry. Yeah, no worries. It's my fault.
No. It's look, we do the best we can. So once again, thank you, David, on behalf of everybody that's in the call, about 40 participants. So I'm sure, given some enlightenment today to all of us. So thank you.
Right. Thank you. No worries. Good to be with you all, and best of luck for the months ahead.
Thank you. All right, guys. Well, we are coming to the tail end of the meeting, and I'm just going to, you might need to kick the control back over to me. I don't know. Maybe give that a shot there. I thought I did reclaim it, but what I'll do is I'll just...
might just close out. I might...
I'll stop your sharing. There we go. Done. Okay, good. See ya.
Okay, bye-bye.
All right, Sarah, where are you? Floating around somewhere in the bubble.
Here.
There you are. All right. At long last, Sarah, you've been very patient. Thank you so much for hanging out and with us in the meeting. Sarah's going to tell us all about Instagram, I believe. So let's give Sarah our attention. Go for it.
Thank you. So I'm going to share some slides here. I think you just
okay. Let me give you control. Let's go.
Okay, and also I know we're quite close to the end of the meeting, so
You're
we
okay.
might.
It's okay. Yeah, we're going to go over a few minutes, so that's fine. Yep.
Okay. Because I'd love to open it up to questions.
Yeah, of course.
Well, if anyone has any burning questions about Instagram. All right. Sorry. Okay.
We are seeing your screen, so that's good.
There we go. Good. All right. So here to talk to you about how, as a mortgage and finance broker, you can use Instagram to grow your business. Now, who associates Instagram with bikini models and fitness gurus, motivational gurus, mummy bloggers, or influencers out for a free lunch? Is that?
Well,
and maybe you're wondering, where do I fit in
models
on Instagram as a broker? What I hope to show you over the next 20 minutes or so is that there's absolutely a place for you to shine on Instagram and use it to grow your business. There's plenty, the groups that I mentioned, the influencers and fitness gurus and so on. While as a society, I think we really like to disparage those people, but we have so much to learn from them in terms of, the power of posting consistently, posting good-looking content, and connecting with their audience to ultimately build their businesses. The good news is, or bad news, depending on what floats your boat, is that you won't need to rock a string bikini to make this work for your business. And you're welcome for that visual. Now, how many of you saw the topic of this presentation and thought, oh, great, here we go, another sort of self-proclaimed social media expert telling us about yet another platform we have to try and master. I'm just going to try and scroll down and see if I can get a show of hands, or at least there looks to be some knowing nods that, yeah, perhaps that was the case.
Well, Sarah, I did a good job of building you up, so there shouldn't be too many people that are too worried about donning a bikini. But now that I know there's bikini models all over Instagram, I might just have a look.
Well, that's it. Look, I feel you in terms of, you know, being a small business owner. I'm not a broker myself, but I do run 2 small businesses, and I understand that, you know, you have to wear 17 hats at any one time. And so rest assured that I'm all about doing things smarter. So it's about getting maximum impact for minimal effort. So that's sort of the lens that I apply to, you know, everything I'm going to take you through today. In my view, Instagram, it's not just a nice to have in amongst all the other platforms. It's really the one that I see as being where brokers should double down their efforts to connect with an audience. If you get it right, like, you really will reap the rewards to the point of having your future customers contact you via Instagram needing your services, which is really the ultimate. We'll just, oops, there we go. Okay, so let's take a quick look at who's actually on Instagram. I wouldn't mind getting a show of hands from you guys as well. How many of you have a personal Instagram account? No, okay, a few. And how many have a business account? Business Instagram account? Okay, a few, not many. Okay, and then keep your hand up if you're posting regularly on that business account. Okay, so hopefully by the end of this session, I'll have inspired you to, you know, get back on the horse and post, you know, join Instagram, use it for your business and post regularly, because that's really key. It's about being consistent. And, you know, to Zarko's point earlier about starting on whatever channel you choose, whether it's Instagram, whether it's your newsletters or, you know, blog content on your website. It really is such a good idea, as you mentioned, to start now and sort of practice now, so that when, you know, the next crises hit, because I guess there'll be another one, you're not sort of scrambling to keep up. What I noticed when COVID hit is that broking businesses that hadn't posted ever or for some time were all of a sudden posting multiple times a day. And it came across as panicked, and it didn't do anything to sort of build their brand as trusted advisor. Quite often they just came across as, you know, a bit of a dodgy salesperson. And so that is the last thing that anyone wants for anyone's brand. Now, if we look at who's on Instagram, there's 10.03 million Australians logging on every month. So that's 2 in 5 Australians, and it's growing month on month. This time last year, there were 1 million less. You know, so it's just getting bigger and bigger. What stands out to me on this slide is that you've got over 3 million in the millennials bracket. And also that the gender split between male and female users is quite even. Now, this is in contrast to about a year ago. You'd have maybe 1/3 of men and 2/3 of women making up active users on the platform. So just something to keep in mind, even when you do create your content. Now, one point I want to make, and what isn't shown on this graph, is that a lot of small businesses and a lot of SMEs are also realizing the potential that Instagram has for their business, and so they're joining. So besides, you know, directly targeting consumers, using Instagram and being active on the platform is a great way to stay top of mind with your referral partners. And, you know, if diversification into SME lending is part of your strategy, it is a great place to attract those type of customers. And next slide. Oh dear. There we go. Okay. So before you get started on Instagram, things to consider, you know, what you can achieve on Instagram. Think about connecting with people in a genuine way, building trust, amplifying your brand and what you stand for, showcasing your expertise, and really helping improve people's financial literacy, which, as we know, is you know, quite dismal in Australia. Instagram users are really the most engaged and easy to engage with out of all the social media platforms. So I've spent a lot of time with all of them, and I'll hand on my heart say that Instagram is the easiest to build an audience. Now, if you've got a Facebook business account, I would hazard a guess that most of your audience are family and or friends, and maybe a few clients that you've become close with, but that it's very, very difficult to sort of build your audience beyond your immediate circle. Whereas with Instagram, if you follow an account of someone who you want to follow back, who you want to follow you back, you've got about a 1 in 3 chance of them following you back and then becoming part of your audience. That is only provided you're posting good looking, useful content. Okay. And so when I started putting this presentation together, I was like, gosh, how do I distill everything I know about Instagram for finance brokers into 20 minutes? And then I realized that would be a fool's errand. And so I've just narrowed it down to 3 points that I want to talk about. So one is aesthetics. That's what we'll start with. The other, just a few do's and don'ts of content. And then the third one is getting followers. So thinking about how important it looks, if you're wondering, does my content need to look good? My answer would be, it depends. Do you want people to trust you with the most important financial decision that they'll ever make? So for me, the answer is a resounding yes. Your content absolutely has to look good. Now, yes, there has to be some substance behind the style, but when you look at all the research about how quickly consumers make, well, we all do, we all make decisions very quickly about something's credibility and attractiveness based on what it looks like. So think of it as, I would liken it to like your shop front. You wouldn't have a messy, sort of mixed up window display advertising your business. And so think of your Instagram content in the same way. When you think of, say, a website and how quickly a consumer makes a decision about whether to trust your business, the latest research says they're making a decision within 50 milliseconds. So and I don't know how many of you have you Tinder, or at least seen how brutally people swipe left and right on Tinder to make a decision about whether to go with that person. So aesthetics are really, really important. Here I'm going to show you, this is an Instagram feed of a business in America. I've hidden their name, but this is quite typical of a lot of what I see, where it's very mismatched. There's lots of sort of, it's quite shouty as well. It's not as considered as it could be. So this is the kind of aesthetic that I would advise you to steer away from. And then these are some examples with the business that I run, not to give you too much of a plug, but the business that I run, which creates Instagram content for brokers. And so you start off with, we've got about 13 themes that you choose from. So these are just 2 of the themes that we have, but you can see that this content does not look salesy, doesn't look like an ad, it's not shouting at people. It really fits into the Instagram aesthetic. And so what happens is when these brokers, try and follow that account, that person looks at their content and decides, oh yeah, that looks good, it's polished, it's attractive, I'm going to follow that account back. And so that is all part of building your audience. Does anyone have any, I'll try and open up the comment box. Does anyone have any sort of comments or questions about any of that so far? No. Okay, save them for the end.
Sorry, Sarah, it doesn't look like it at this stage. Yeah, keep going.
Cool. Now, in terms of what to post, so this is by no means an exhaustive list, but think about, all the information that you have that your consumers don't have. So, think of all the sort of common questions that come up. So you can use your Instagram feed to educate people on the process, educate them about the value proposition of using a broker, really get them to understand that it's not all about rates. Explain your business's unique value proposition. What makes, why should the customer go with you and not the broker next door? And also Instagram, and this is in contrast to a lot of other social media channels. Instagram is very feel good and very positive. So in contrast specifically to Twitter, which is very angry and shouty, and Facebook, which is just a mixed bag. Instagram users are very generous with their feedback, and just, very positive. And so a lot of the content you'll see, it looks fluffy on the surface. It might be some kind of motivational quote, but what you can do, if you're smart about it, is actually in the caption, weave in your value proposition, or weave in, how that relates to how you can help the customer. This list of don'ts, these, I'm sure you're looking at them thinking, of course we wouldn't do that, it's not compliant, certainly not ethical. But I see a lot of businesses promoting, say, that $4,000 cashback. Now that's been really interesting for me to see. I personally feel, and not being a lawyer myself, I can't say categorically, but I feel that's treading a grey line. So I use those insights of knowing, okay, there's a $4,000 cashback and everyone's posting about it. So I've created posts for my broker clients to say, proceed with caution. There's a lot of banks trying to lure you in with $4,000 cashbacks. That is not to say that that's going to be the best option for you. Speak to us and we'll make sure that we set you up with something that's going to serve you in the long term. And what that automatically does is show that that broker is there for the consumer, acting in their best interests. And so it really raises them up as being like highly ethical and trustworthy. The third point there, which also seems sort of obvious, but worth saying, because I do see it a lot, is don't encourage frivolous borrowing. The good brokers and the accounts that I see have really positive engagement and get larger audiences. They're not encouraging people to, borrow for a wedding or borrow for an overseas trip. They're talking about budgeting. They're talking about the difference between good debt and bad debt. And they're really, again, setting themselves up as being like that trusted advisor who is there for the customer in the long term. I'll move on from that. I could talk about the, what to post about and how to message it for hours, but I won't. The last point I want to talk about is getting followers. Now, when I say reciprocal following, that just means you following the accounts of people that you want to follow you back. And so you could start with your customer database and make sure you're keeping in touch with your customers on Instagram. It's a great way to stay top of mind, meet them where they are. People go on Instagram to tune out, and it's much easier to be seen by them than it is to send them. You certainly can't be sending them an email every second day, whereas they might chance across your Instagram content every second day if you're posting frequently. With your, just on the, who to follow, go to the business profiles of your local accountants, car dealerships, restaurants, lawyers, and look at accounts that have recently engaged with their content. So that's a great starting point as well. Focus on quality over quantity. So don't get too caught up in the numbers, and how many followers you have. They're really vanity metrics. Personally, the social broker account, I think we're only on, say, 250 followers. That is the biggest source of business for us, because those 250 people are very targeted. They're the exact people that I want to see the content. The third point here is to be active. And so people will try and sort of game the Instagram algorithm. You just can't. Like, they've got the best and brightest minds working on it. And the purpose of it really is to reward human, natural sort of community building behavior, and to penalize behavior that looks like a robot. And so what I say to my customers who use the social broker content is, even though they don't have to worry about posting their content, they need to either themselves or get a team member to log in frequently and engage with other accounts. Because if Instagram gets a whiff that maybe you're treating your profile as your own private billboard, it will punish you. So you'll just be posting out into the ether. It won't be pushing your content to any of your followers. So it'll be a wasted exercise. The very last point is just understand that while it won't happen overnight, but it will happen, to quote that special K ad. So definitely don't be suckered in by those free followers or buy followers. Don't do any of that. There's like a follow unfollow trick. Don't do any of that. So just be patient, grow your follower list naturally, organically, and then then you'll be building a very valuable audience of engaged people. So they're my top tips. Does anybody have any questions? Are you maybe feeling a little more enthusiastic about the potential of Instagram, or less so? I hope not.
I certainly am. I think that's a really fantastic, quick look at what Instagram is. We do have a couple of questions in the chat. I don't know if you can see those, but
yeah, I'm just trying to pull them up now.
Let's see here. One thing I might do, and I can't see everyone's view, but if guys and gals are interested in a more thorough look into Instagram, I'm sure, Sarah, you'd be happy to maybe give us that broader and deeper look into what Instagram is.
Very presumptuous there, PJ. No, did you? I think you've correctly picked up that I would love to talk about Instagram at length, and yet love to help people use it well, because it has such potential. So absolutely, if anyone is interested.
Yeah, cool. Well, we got a lot of questions that I think we would probably spend the next 10 or 15 minutes talking about, which we just don't have the time to do, because unfortunately I've got to go to another meeting. But guys, I will just, I think everyone can unmute themselves at the moment. If we could maybe just have one question for Sarah from anyone that has something simple, maybe something that'll take her, 30, 45 seconds to answer. We can do that. We have time for that.
And I do see a few questions here. So someone says, I wished you could post from your desktop. You can. I will send you, or I'll send it to PJ and he can pass it on. There are some free tools that you can do that. I recommend posting a month in advance, or your post for that month, because we're all really busy. So you've got to post in advance. Can I link an Instagram show back to my website? Yes, you can embed your Instagram feed on your website. Yes, I can answer that in more detail. Sorry, PJ, you did say one question.
Yeah, that's okay. Well, we've answered a couple there. They were really nice, quick snippet questions. So that's good. Well, Sarah, thank you very much for giving us that little bit of insight into Instagram. I've got to say, it's a platform that I completely discounted, because for me it was just something I'd look at and all I'd see is people, pictures of their kids and and drinking wine and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, you know, where would I find customers? But or how would I find customers there? But clearly, you are doing a lot of business through it, which is a testament to the fact that it's a good platform to be on. And I think just final point, I'll just quickly ask or raise is not a lot of people are doing it. Not a lot of brokers are there. So it's pretty ripe hunting ground.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. There you go.
Awesome. Sorry, I do have, it's just on the screen that I do have an offer for your members if they're,
okay, let's hear it.
If you're keen. So we do, sorry, and I feel very, very forward now, but it is there. We do monthly subscriptions. So we produce the content, we write the captions. It's all branded, you can check it out. But if it is something you're interested in, and you sign up, there's no contract, you can cancel anytime, but we'll refund your second month. So that could be anywhere from $99 to $150 back in your pocket for that month.
So it looks like they just go to socialbroker.com.au to check out that your stuff and the offer and everything. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
But at the very least, I would love if people, not to buy my stuff, I'd love if people follow the account on Social Broker, because I share a lot of tips and insights and ideas on that. So just, you know, to sort of improve your familiarity with the platform, just create an account. You don't have to post anything straight away.
Okay. Awesome. Well, guys, jump onto socialbroker.com.au and get into Insta, follow Sarah. And I'm gonna start looking for those bikini models. All I can see is pictures of people's stupid kids. I don't want to look at that. Where's it? Show me the bikini model. Anyway, sorry, I'm kidding. Your kids aren't stupid. All right, guys, listen. No, we can't have 5 minutes Nissan because we got to wrap up. We're well over time, and if you guys want to network and stuff like that, call each other. Host a Zoom meeting. Listen, you can put a Zoom meeting together on behalf of the IFBF and have a networking session for sure. So guys, we are going to leave it at that. Thank you so much, everybody, for sticking around. And I think that was an awesome meeting, and I hope you agree. Thank you to everybody who spoke, and I hope the economic update was useful. There was a lot of stuff in there. So I'll try to get a rebroadcast of this ready and up on the IFBF website for everyone to have a look at if you want to go back through that. And if anyone wants the slides or anything from David, I can probably obtain those as well. So I'll see how I go there. Guys, with that, have an awesome weekend. Get out, be fruitful, and enjoy the rest of Friday. Write some business. See everybody.
Perfect. Thanks, everyone. Bye. Bye.
Thanks, PJ.